I think that now we can move to the concluding panel for today, which is going to be moderated by Patrick Temple-West. So Patrick, thank you very much for joining us from US. Patrick is an expert on ESG as a journalist for Financial Times. In the past, before joining FT, he was working in Washington, DC for media covering financial regulation. And before that, he was working for Reuters. Patrick holds degrees from various prestigious universities, including Northwestern and Wharton. So Patrick, over to you. You have a panel of 4 distinguished panelists, so we're looking forward to hearing your views. May I remind to the audience, feel free to send questions so that Patrick can use them during his session. Thank you, Patrick.
Yes, great. And thank you, George, for the opportunity here. It's one of the really rewarding parts of my job is to have these type of conversations. We love talking about these issues, and I think we really gain a lot from, everybody seems to learn a lot from having these conversations. So it's a real pleasure. Yes, I started at the Financial Times in 2019 to cover ESG, sustainable investing specifically, really looking at the new products that financial institutions were bringing online, green bonds, sustainable bonds, and a wide array of new ESG funds for equities. We've also been covering climate change risks for the financial sector, where there are threats from global warming that are underappreciated by risk managers. I'd like to hear some of the thoughts from the panelists here. Wanted to see if folks could introduce themselves and give a brief description of their work at their various firms here. Konstantina, would you be able to start us off? Tell us a little bit about your role at Grant Thornton.
Of course. Hi, everyone. It is a pleasure and my honor to participate in this event with you. I am the financial services partner, the head of the financial services in Grant Thornton, Greece, and I'm a certified public accountant, amongst others.
Great. Dimitrios Dimopoulos, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and your work at Piraeus.
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. My name is Dimitrios, and I'm the head of the ESG unit, which is part of the corporate development and ESG department in the bank. I've been working for the bank for the last 15 or so years, always involved in sustainability issues. And you know, we're one of the units that really bring together other units within the bank to work on ESG issues and sustainability matters.
Great. Well, thank you for joining us. Alexandra, could you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work at HSBC?
Hi, Patrick, and it's also a pleasure for me to be part of this panel today and discuss this very important topic. I'm heading the wholesale banking division of HSBC in Greece, and I have more than 20 years experience in financial institutions and in corporates as in CFO and treasury positions. And I have very much been involved in recent sustainable finance transactions that we did out of Greece as HSBC, and happy to discuss further later on.
Excellent, thank you. And finally, Dimitrios Kapissis, if you could introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about your work at PwC.
Hi, Patrick, and thank you. Really nice joining you in this session. I'm the head of ESG Sustainability and Climate Change Services here in Greece. In fact, as part of our services, we also help financial market participants, including banks, in order to transform during their ESG journey from an end-to-end transformation, including sustainable finance, of course. And I'm looking forward for this discussion today.
Great. And again, thank you all for your time here. Konstantinos, I wanted to start with you, see if you could talk a little bit about the Recovery and Resilience Fund. If you could give us just a brief background about the RRF and its scope, and a little bit about what the investments and the reforms might mean for daily life of Greek citizens.
Of course. In 2020, the COVID outbreak changed the world's outlook, calling for an urgent response in order to cope with the enormous economic and social consequences. In this context, the European Commission established the RRF, a key tool to turn these challenges into a long-term opportunity. The RRF is a comprehensive financial package to support and transform EU economies, focusing in green economy and the achievement of EU climate targets, digital transition, achieving smart and inclusive sustainable growth, strengthen social and territorial cohesion, and policies for next generation. The total funds are approximately 672.5 billion, a large portion of which is non-repayable financial support, meaning grants, and the remaining are in the form of loans. In order to utilize these resources, every member state had to submit a national plan outlining the reform and investment agenda in sufficient granularity, meaning project scope, targets, budgeting, and specific milestones. Our country was one of the two first countries to proceed with the submission on the 27th of April with a comprehensive and robust national plan, and we are hoping to receive the relevant approvals as soon as possible.
Great, thank you. And Dimitrios Sigippas, do you have any sense about how do grants and loans of the RRF will link with ESG factors? Do you have any thoughts about how the financing from RRF will be intertwined with ESG?
Sure. We know that 37%, actually more than 37% of the total grants are going to be invested towards green transition. And we also know that more than 40% of the total loans are also going to have a green-related aspect. But in order to be able to understand what does this mean, we need to go into a bit more deep dive. So we have already flagship green-related investments. For example, electro-connectivity between mainland and islands, energy-saving programs, or energy storage-related investments, which have already been defined and promote green transition. Other green-related investments have also been identified and are included in the Greek RRF. Yeah. In order for investment to be able to update the relevant green tagging, relevant terms are going to be incorporated into the RFPs, the calls that the ministries will advise towards the public, as well as during the completion, mechanisms will be developed that will check and ensure that the relevant investments have obtained the required green tagging, meaning that they conform with the green-related requirements. One more point is that all investments of RRF have been assessed against the do no significant harm principles, which is part of the EU Taxonomy Regulation. And this shows the path that the EU has already decided to go on with regards to incorporated green and environmental related aspects during the investment decision process.
Great, thank you. Dimitrios Dimopoulos, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about how the bank's role in this, and specifically on the principles for responsible banking, where there might be a relationship between those requirements, those standards, and the RFF. I know Piraeus was one of the banks that core group that created the principles for responsible banking, which is something that we covered when they launched. I believe it was in 2019 or maybe even 2018. But we've been writing about that. So I just wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the principles for responsible banking and where they fit in to the overall ESG ecosystem.
Patrick, thanks for the question. Well, in order to help the economies take a more sustainable journey, financial institutions need a kind of a set of principles and guidance so that they can be able to set targets and raise ambition levels. And that's exactly what the principles for responsible banking aspire to do. And we're at Piraeus Bank, we're a member of the UNIFFR-EBRD. We have been for a while. And when in 2018, the UNIFFR-EBRD decided that we need to create a set of principles that will guide the banks in the next decades in becoming more sustainable in the way that they operate and in the way that they finance. We were one of the 30 core banks that joined that call, and we started working and actually drafted those principles. It was in 2018 when the principles were first presented in Paris, and our CEO was there. He was one of the very few CEOs to be there. And in 2019, in September in New York, our CEO was there again, actually for the official ceremony. So yes. What do these principles aim at? Well, basically they want to urge the banks to align their policies, their portfolios with the Paris Agreement and the SDGs. They ask the banks to set targets, measurable targets, smart targets, and try to reduce their negative impacts and at the same time increase their positive impact. So it's about impacts. It's not just about how much I fund or where do I fund, but what kind of impact do I have in the real world, on the world, on the economy, on employment, on societies, and all the rest. And it's also about being transparent, and it's about working together with your clients and with your customers and setting targets and helping them, because we have to realize that banks alone cannot solve these great challenges that we face, and climate, is one of the biggest challenges humanity is facing, along with biodiversity loss and all the other concomitant social issues. So it is very important that we work with our stakeholders, governments, private sector, public sector, our investors, our shareholders, our employees, in order to be able to do what Dimitrios said before, like to help, absorb all these funds that will be coming into Greece and really making them useful and helping the real economy and helping create a resilient economy. You need personnel that is aware, that is trained and understands what sustainability and what ESG is all about. So it's a question of changing mindsets, and that's exactly what we've been doing within our bank.
Great. Well, thank you. And Alexandra, could you talk a little bit about the same concepts at HSBC? How have you seen integrating the sustainable banking goals? I know Dimitrios was talking about setting smart targets and about impact. How do you see and integrate the concepts of sustainable banking at HSBC?
Look, Patrick, at HSBC, we have actually been at the forefront of the sustainable finance markets for more than a decade. And we see current conditions as a great opportunity to accelerate this process. So last October, we have set an ambitious plan to align our financed emissions, which means the carbon emissions of our portfolio of customers, to net zero by 2050 or sooner. And this is in line with the goals of the Paris Agreement that Dimitris mentioned as well. So we are putting, let's say, aggressive and targets in terms of aligning ourselves with a net zero ambition. How do we plan to do this? So what we're doing is we are intensifying our support for customers to switch to more sustainable ways of doing business. That's the way forward. We have the scale and global reach to play a leading role in advising them on their journey towards net zero. And we have committed between $750 billion to $1 trillion on a global basis to finance investments by 2030 to help them achieve this goal. We have also established a dedicated ESG solution unit, and we are developing tailor-made finance solutions, focusing mainly on decarbonizing the heavy emitting sectors. We have been at the forefront of developing the sustainable debt capital markets, and we have pioneered a number of transactions which are the first of their kind globally, and for Greece as well. The one being the sustainability-linked bond that we did for the public power utility to help them on their decarbonization plan. And I'm happy to discuss in more detail later. We have also recently announced an important partnership with the World Resources Institute and Worldwide Fund for Nature to support sustainable projects that would otherwise face barriers to finance. So it's important also to bring climate solutions to commercial viability and scale. With respect to our own financing decisions, we apply ESG criteria and we apply a climate lens, and we make regular and transparent disclosures and encourage our customers to do also the same. As Dimitrios mentioned, it's also important to collaborate with peers, other financial institutions, central banks, industry bodies, institutions, to establish globally consistent standards for financial emissions and ESG criteria. Last but not least, we have set an internal target, so you need to have your house in order. So we're aiming at achieving net zero in our own operations and supply chain by 2030 or sooner.
Excellent. Thank you, Alexandra. I wanted to see a quick follow-up on that, the deal, I believe you said it was a sustainability-linked loan for the public power
corporation.
project. If you could talk a little bit more about that. I mean, that's something that was really top of mind for us in our coverage, is these new innovative products that financial institutions have launched to help tilt more toward green, in the energy sector, more green renewable energy, as opposed to more sort of the fossil fuel production that they've done. So I'd love to hear more about that, that deal structure.
Yeah, so just to start with PPC, PPC has announced a very aggressive lignite decommissioning plan. So they aim to shut down all lignite plants by 2023 and just leave one, which they want to convert to another fuel or to renewables by 2028. And they have also an aggressive renewables investment plan. So access to the debt capital markets was key for this company in order to be able to realize this aggressive plan. Now, the bond that we did for them had a sustainability KPI linked to it. So the company had to develop what we call a sustainability bond framework to be also certified by a second party opinion. This framework outlined the strategy of the company in terms of achieving reduction in carbon emissions. And there was a specific measurable target in terms of scope 1 and scope 2 carbon emissions that went into the framework. And the bond envisages a penalty, a coupon step up, if the company doesn't achieve this target. So this is a financing structure that actually ties to the commitment of the company in achieving a specific sustainability KPI, and created a lot of interest from international investors, which came in, with large orders, which allowed the company to price at a quite attractive coupon. So, and there were, dedicated ESG funds that otherwise could not invest into this company, given the current status that they have with lignite plants still in operation. So it was absolutely key for them to have this sustainability KPI in order to be able to access international investors.
Great. Dimitrios Diplopoulos, I wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about the sustainability products at Piraeus. Have you worked on similarly structured sustainability-linked loans in Greece, and any other products that we were talking about? Again, this is a really interesting area for us to be covering, because it's such an emerging field, and new products are coming online that the financial sector really hasn't seen before.
Yeah, well, Patrick, the truth is that we first issued green products back in 2007, 2008, and at that time it was the beginning of the photovoltaic era in Greece. So supporting renewable energy was one of the priorities that as a bank we had set at that time. And today we have the largest renewable energy portfolio in Greece with a current 2.5 billion green loan exposure, and there's an additional appetite for another $1 billion by 2024. We actually issued the first ESG mutual fund in Greece, and we would also proceeded with sustainability-linked loans, and I think we've done about at least 3 in the last year or so, and we find that this is a very, very interesting approach, and this is what it ties in with what I was saying before, that you have to work closely with your clients and your customers, because it's not a question of ignoring or deciding not to finance a certain business for whatever reason. The point is how you can actually work with the client and steer them into the sustainable direction. So it's very important that we collaborate and build these kind of relationships. And we'll be seeing a lot more of these sustainability loans and products in the future, because we have set a target, and we've already committed to the collective commitment to collective climate action, UNIFFR, and we want to align our portfolio with a 1.45 degrees economy by 2050, the latest. And in fact, we want to become carbon neutral by that. So when we have these kind of general strategic targets, you understand that we're investing in renewable energy, investing in sustainable products, and helping and working with our clients is a priority for us. And you need the right internal structure, you need the right governance, and we have a very robust governance when it comes to ESG issues, and that is what is guiding us in working with the market, with our clients, and with our customers.
And just a quick follow-up question, Dimitrios. I mean, do you see you said the products, the sustainability-linked loans, an accelerating of that in the year ahead? Do you see more demand for those type of products coming?
I'm quite sure we'll be seeing a lot more of those products. They're more flexible, and they're even more flexible than green bonds. So
exactly.
I that these kind of instruments will be playing a very big role in the future. And we need to scale up and investments in renewable energy, in sustainable infrastructure. We need to speed up, if we want to meet the goals, the Paris Climate Agreement goals, the SDGs, and of course the targets that the European Union has set. We want to be the first carbon neutral continent by 2050, and there's targets by 2030, and we will be accelerating the work that we are doing so that we can help in reaching these targets, and financial institutions are going to play a very, very important role, working together with the governments and the EU and of course our clients, as I mentioned before.
Great. Yeah, it's the sustainability-linked loans is a really interesting product, and you're right, it is another tool in the toolbox for banks to offer companies that might not be able to fit the green bond model, might not be able to fit in that framework. So it's a product that, like I said, we're going to be following closely in the months ahead. Konstantinos, I wanted to ask you about, as we're seeing the banks put out more and more of these products, how crucial is the green transition for Greece in order to achieve the effective transformation for the domestic economy? How crucial are these products and developing that green transition for Greece?
The green transition is of paramount importance and lies at the very heart of the Greek national program that we discussed. I think these financial instruments are very important, and their role will keep increasing in the years to come. And the green transition cannot be viewed merely from an economic perspective. It represents our generation defining task. We have to tackle the climate and environmental challenges. We have to protect the health and well-being of our people and deliver a better and sustainable society to our children. Specifically in Greece, besides all these financial instruments that the banks have developed and are very important, we have specific actions through our national plan that we submitted. First of all, we are rapidly moving away from lignite, our so-called national fuel, as we said, to renewable energy sources, producing clean, affordable, and secure energy. We are transforming our agricultural sector through new and innovative environmentally friendly production methods and crops. We are renovating our buildings in an energy and efficient use of resources. We accelerate the shift to a sustainable and smart mobility. I mean, all these actions will take us a step forward to a new era, an era that is prescribed as Greece 2.0 in our national plan, and the banks will play a vital role in this and will be at the forefront of this effort.
Great. And Dimitrios Kakipis, as Konstantinos was saying there, the banks, the financial institutions playing such a crucial role. What are the most important elements of ESG transformation that would affect the bank's operating model? What are some of these key elements that are part of the ESG transformation for banks?
Yes, thanks, Patrick. In order to answer this question, the first step is to understand the ESG ecosystem. We're talking about a really complex and dynamic ecosystem here with multiple dimensions. First of all, we have regulatory requirements. We have the taxonomy, the SFDR, the ECB guidelines on climate risks, as well as many other regulations existing or upcoming that affect banks and the way that they operate. Secondly, we have rating agencies. MSCI, Sustainalytics, Standard & Poor's rate, and they do not use the same baseline. So banks need to adapt in order to meet the requirements of multiple different rating agencies or indexes. Thirdly, we have reporting frameworks. Over 100 reporting frameworks exist at this time globally. These reporting frameworks mean that they mandate different KPIs or material issues to be disclosed by companies. So peers cannot have comparable disclosures among each other. So it's really difficult to compare ESG performance between banks' portfolio companies. And of course, we have voluntary standards, which at least for the last years, they tend to use acronyms, TCFD, UNIFFR, PRB. These acronyms are now part of our life. And although they are voluntary, they somehow force financial institutions to take immediate actions with regards to sustainability performance. So this complex ESG ecosystem means that banks need to adapt, and adapt, first of all, their whole operating model. And when we talk about operating model, the first thing that comes into mind is governance. So what do banks need to do in terms of governance? Do they need to establish ESG committees? At what level? At a board level? At an executive level? And what are the authorities of the relevant committees? First of all, secondly, what is the role of the ESG department? Traditionally, we had CSR departments, sustainable development departments, or even marketing departments involved in sustainability-related topics. So the new role of the ESG department needs to be clearly defined. Then policies, procedures need to be updated, roles and responsibilities need to be defined, and of course, changes with regards to IT-related infrastructure need to be in place. Systems and tools need to be adapted in order to be able to meet the requirements with regards to ESG reporting, collect information, screening investments, and then automate the disclosure process. From our experience, systemic banks, all banks in Greece are currently undergoing this ESG transformation process, let me pose it like that. And the operating model plays a really critical point within this journey.
Great, thank you. Alexandria and Dimitrios was talking a little bit about the ecosystem and the challenges for banks. And wanted to see if you could talk a little bit about some of the challenges that you might be seeing in adopting sustainable financing, and how has the pandemic affected that? I mean, obviously we're hopefully coming out of a really difficult economic downturn spurred by the pandemic. Is that impact of the pandemic accelerating adoption, or has that put the brakes on adoption? I'm just wondering what you're seeing in terms of the challenges and how the overall pandemic might have affected that.
Patrick, I believe that the pandemic has acted as a wake-up call for governments, corporates, financial institutions, and societies.
Yeah.
It acted as an accelerator. You know, there's definitely a growing realization that our economic welfare depends also on living in a healthy planet. So transition to low carbon, net zero, sustainable economy is one of the biggest opportunities that we are faced today, and we have to seize this opportunity, definitely. So there are challenges, as we discussed. There is the fact that there is no standardization, for example, on the way ESG targets are being reported or followed.
Yeah.
At HSBC, as I said, we have to start reporting on the carbon emissions of our portfolio of customers. So this is something that we will start following very closely and report. Clients at the same time, we need to be very close and work with our clients to prepare for their sustainability journey, to help them embed ESG targets in their strategic objectives, embed them in their investment plans. As at the end of the day, this is what the way that they can access capital. I think the cost of capital will also be affected, you know, so it will be a competitive advantage for the companies that have moved faster on this front. Investors are also increasingly, asset managers from an equity standpoint are also increasingly applying ESG criteria when they decide where to put their money in. So, and this is not just a nice to have. I believe they see a clear link between ESG and the ability of the company to yield sustainable returns. And at the end of the day, they will see it in appreciation of the stock price. And we mentioned already that on the debt capital markets front as well, there's a surge in green, but mostly in the sustainable linked bonds segment, which is still small.
Yeah, right.
Especially in the first months of this year, it has really, skyrocketed in terms of activity, and there is more and more to come. And we have seen companies like Sustainalytics and ISS, which are rating and the companies and preparing the frameworks are really, really busy. So this means that there are there's a lot of pipeline for issuers to access this sustainable finance market.
Great. Okay. Dimitrios, I wanted to see if Dimitrios Dimopoulos, I wanted to see if you could respond to that on 2 points there. On the governance question for the financial institutions that Dimitrios Kikipis referenced. I know you talked a little bit about that internally at Piraeus, but I wanted to see if you could just return to that about how financial institutions or companies more broadly should work ESG mindset into the governance of the institution. And then also a little bit about what Alexandra was talking about in terms of the cost of capital. Are you seeing for companies that might not be taking ESG sustainability too seriously, are their costs of capital going up? How might they be thinking about ESG sustainable strategies to find some savings on their costs for financing?
Well, before I answer that question, I just wanted to say that one of the lessons that we learned from the COVID pandemic is that when you want to deal with big issues, with global issues, global challenges, you need cooperation, and you need cooperation at a big level. You start from within your own company, within the bank, and then you move up and include all levels. So it's very, very important to cooperate. And in order to be able to cooperate, you need a strong governance. That's why I keep bringing this issue up of governance. And this is what we put a lot of emphasis on within our bank. Driving the ESG agenda is something which is done at the highest level. Our CEO, the board, have actually embraced this effort. Our CEO many a time has said that, you know, we understand that ESG is the way forward, and it will probably be the mainstream. It will be the only option that we have to do business in the very, very near future. So having the board, having the CEO, having the top management on board is very, very important. And creating the internal culture, another word and another concept that I find very interesting, because all these we've been talking about, how do we invest more into sustainable investments in projects and all that. How do we change the world? You need to do that by changing yourself first, the way that you think. You can't solve problems using the same way of thinking
exactly
as when you created the problem. So changing your mindset, changing the culture is very important. So we put a lot of emphasis internally on training and our staff at all levels. We run a lot of internal workshops and talk so that the different departments, coordinated by the ESG unit in many cases, actually can bring about the change, the internal change, so that we can bring about the external change. That's why we've committed also to the Science-Based Targets Initiative, and we want to align our portfolio with the 1.5 degrees economy. We're actually focusing on biodiversity, which I think is going to be the next big challenge that companies and banks will be facing. And we're already building expertise on that. I think at the end of the day, that ESG is not actually a cost. ESG is an investment, and from what we can see and various reports that we read, we see that ESG companies that embrace ESG in many cases outperform their peers. So I think that ESG is not a cost. ESG is changing the way that you work. It's changing the way you think. It changes the way that you do business. And once you do that, you realize that it is a safe path, because I don't think we'll really have another option, to be honest with you, Patrick.
Of course, right.
Because there is no plan B, for our planet. We have only one planet. So we have to do as much as we can as companies, as banks, to provide and contribute to a planet that is livable, to an economy that is vibrant, to companies that can flourish and thrive.
Demetrios, one follow-up question on something you mentioned there. What are the science-based target initiatives? I know we've written about them, but I think just for the people watching, there's so many of these acronyms that get tossed about. Can you tell us a little bit about the science-based target initiatives? What do those require, and what sort of the genesis of that might have been?
Well, put it bluntly, it's an NGO, and what you do is actually you submit a commitment. And once this commitment is approved by this NGO, the Science-Based Target Initiative, and then you actually set specific targets, and these targets are tested and verified by these non-governmental organizations, and you are actually obliged on a regular basis to report on your progress and make any corrective movements that you have to do. So basically what it is, it's a voluntary initiative, but it also at the same time, as you said, it brings about a kind of a commitment, and it really is a driver for you, for a company, for the bank, to do what it wants to do, and make sure that it discloses progress and is transparent and accountable about what targets it takes. This also falls into the spirit of the principles for responsible banking of UNIFR 5 that I mentioned before.
Great. Thank you, Demetrios. Konstantinos, I wanted to pivot back to you for a second here. One of the questions that came in from the audience, I wanted to get your thoughts on this, and anybody else on the panel here who might have a perspective. We've been talking about what banks can be doing here to help maybe some more of these polluting businesses, some of these less green businesses develop some financing tools to help them clean up their business models. But can banks also put some pressure on companies to speed up the process through funding activities? I mean, is there room, is there an opportunity here for banks to put some pressure on the companies? Obviously, we've talked a lot about the financial products, green bonds, sustainable linked loans that they are offering, but do banks play a role in putting some pressure on companies to speed up the process?
Of course, definitely. The answer is, of course they can. The banks have the ability to put pressure on their clients in terms of ESG practices or corporate governance practices. And I believe that they have played this role in the past, and they're actively updating their internal processes, their credit policies and systems in order to accommodate these changes and let's say put qualitative criteria, for example, in their credit policies. So I think it's a continuous effort. Of course, the banks have the ability, and I think that they are doing, they are actively doing this job at based on their ability each time.
I can confirm, yeah, I
yes,
can
please.
confirm what Dinos is saying. So it's part of our credit analysis and assessment for clients, how they do on the ESG front and what is their sustainability targets. Definitely plays a key role in assessing.
Excellent. Okay. One of the other, a couple other questions have come through here on the regulatory front. Have you seen new regulations on ESG, sustainable financing, and the need for companies to comply with either regulatory reporting or monitoring? How have you seen the regulations on the ESG sustainable front playing out in practice? I mean, is this extra work, extra cost that might not be producing, might not be making that much effort, or are the regulations really driving some sustainable changes?
Do you want me to?
Yes, please. That was just an open question to whomever wanted to jump in.
I thought it was a question for anyone to answer.
It is, yes.
I think that, you know, following the 2015 Paris Agreement and the SDGs, and in 2017 the TCFD recommendations on how to report on climate risk and all the rest, we've seen a slew of regulation coming in, especially from the European part, the ECB and all that. Just recently, the ECB issued a guidance, and that's just last year, like the end of last year, a guidance on climate-related risks and environmental risks, and practically all the banks in the European Union submitted recently a roadmap on how to incorporate climate and ESG risks in their portfolios. And in fact, next year, you know, the ECB will be running the first climate test. So we're actually seeing a lot of this regulation coming in, and being prepared for this is very important. And that's one of the things that we've been doing. That's what I've meant before, when, you know, we've created the culture over these last decade, you know, working with on sustainability issues within Piraeus Bank. We have created that culture, and that is now speeding up. And we saw how fast we moved in setting our roadmap and deploying all the tools that we have created already. We already have a tool to measure the impact of climate risk on our clients, and that is gradually being integrated in our risk management and in our loan origination stage and all the rest.
Okay.
So having this right mentality and this culture has really helped speed up internal procedures. And I guess once we've done that, we'll be able to go out there and report to the supervisory authorities and regulators what we've been doing.
If I could add here to all
please.
this really interesting thing that Dimitris mentioned before. You know, the key driver here is the EU. So EU has a strategy to become climate neutral by 2050.
Right.
And in order to implement this strategy, it has developed a set of regulatory initiatives. And the most important of them is a Sustainable Finance Action Plan, which actually incorporates 10 different regulations or directives which force financial market participants to drive sustainable growth. there are two key regulations that needs to be considered carefully. The first one is the Taxonomy Regulation. I think more or less all of us in this table have already heard, and the reason is that the effective date is quite immediate. Within the next few months, companies that meet the criteria, meaning are large SPY listed companies, need to perform actions in order to measure how taxonomy they are. However, what we think will be a game changer, especially for the market, is the proposal that recently was issued by the EU in order to update the non-financial reporting directive. As part of this proposal, which is expected to be effective by 2024 for the financial year of 2023, we expect 4 major changes. First of all, EU has committed to establish a common reporting framework. This means a common reporting standard under which all companies which are subject to the relevant regulation need to follow. Secondly, we have introduction of mandatory audit assurance. Even though it's limited assurance, it still be assurance over KPIs related to ESG information. Third of all, we have digitization of the relevant information, meaning a common e-language like XBRL, where relevant information is going to be uploaded, and this will enable comparison and quick access to benchmarking data. All these set of regulations under the Sustainable Finance Action Plan are really the key change driver with regards to sustainable growth. This is at least what we believe that it's the driving vehicle behind moving on to a more regulated environment towards ESG.
Just a quick follow-up question on that. And you mentioned the assurance requirements. And is that something, I mean, the PwC would be working with companies on? Can you just elaborate a little bit about the, and you think you said it was mandatory assurances, am I correct?
Yes. Many companies, as part of their sustainability report, they assure certain KPIs. This means that they hire an auditor, an external independent third party, in order to assure certain KPIs or disclosures. However, this currently happens only on a voluntary basis. As of 2024, and if the proposal is voted by the EU, then mandatory assurance of relevant KPIs is going to be introduced. So companies such as PwC, of course, are going to be called by their clients in order to perform audit procedures over ESG-related information. And this is why I said that this proposal is really a game changer once it is effective, because you have assurance over financial information, but never again in the past assurance over ESG-related information,
yeah, exactly.
At least on a mandatory basis.
Right. It's really interesting. I mean, Europe, it's just such a different regulatory landscape. I mean, in the US, after this most recent election, we're only now starting to talk about some of these mandating some of these ESG requirements. It just goes to show how, sitting here in New York, how far behind the US is in updating and developing regulations for the ESG sector, while in Europe, not only have the rules been written, but they're starting to come online in the months and years ahead. So thank you for that, Dimitrios. One other question that has come through, and we've touched on this a little bit, but Alexandra, I wanted to see if you might be able to talk about this, and Dimitrios as well. Have banks incorporated ESG taxonomy and metrics into their risk management frameworks and their credit decision making?
Yes, we do, and we require for as I said, from our clients to report to us what they're doing in their ESG front. Why we do it? Because we believe that the companies that will survive in the long run, will perform in the long run, are those that adopt ESG. So it is part of our credit decision process and risk management process.
Great. And Dimitrios, please.
Yes. I just wanted to add that, yes, we do take that into consideration, and we're actually working on the how we can actually incorporate EU taxonomy in our core banking products. The EU taxonomy was made basically for financial products, but also it can be applied for core banking products. That's why we're participating in a group, a working group of UNIFFR and the European Banking Federation, in order to to develop guides and create the expertise that we need in order to apply that. So it's one of the challenges, and I guess, you know, as we are moving into the implementing our roadmap for climate risk, as I mentioned before, following the ECB expectations, one of the targets that we've set is to fully incorporate EU taxonomy, and you know, calculating the green asset ratio of our portfolio. That's why we have to work closely with our clients to get the right data. And getting the data, that's one of the biggest challenges that all banks, I understand, are facing. You know, and that's why the European Union, on the other hand, is trying to create a space where, you know, like, companies will be uploading all that information, so banks can have easy access.
Okay.
For SMEs, it's going to be a little bit difficult because they're small and they don't have the capacity or the resources to do so. But there will be other ways of working around that issue. So working together with our SMEs and clients is very, very important.
Patrick,
yes, please.
I just want to add, you know, that there's also the challenge around the metrics. Metrics sometimes are easier to put in place for example, for environmental issues like, you know, carbon emissions. More difficult to put in place transparent, measurable metrics for social or governance. So there's a challenge around that as well. That's
No, that's a great point. And do you know, are those social components, are those social criteria, are those becoming mandatory as well?
To a degree, yes, they are, because the EU taxonomy, for example, has the do no significant harm and also has the minimal social safeguards. So yes, they are taken into consideration.
Yeah.
Demetrios, what was that you mentioned? UNPFRI or PFI? What was that? I just wanted to see if you could unpackage that acronym for us.
The PCAF or whatever. Well, basically, that's a methodology, you know, if I understand the question right, okay, that's a methodology that we are applying. It's an international methodology to measure carbon emissions, because measuring scope 3 carbon emissions, especially those emissions that are related to your financing, is the biggest challenge. But that's where the banks have their biggest impact. So being able to have a methodology which is worldwide accepted and acknowledged will help in providing comparable, let's say, results, and being, how can I say, you could be setting targets, and those targets can actually be verified by third parties, which will be mandatory. In the meantime, we do have an assurance on a voluntary level, and we do assure all our material issues that arise every year through a methodology that we apply. So we do have that experience as a bank, and pretty soon we'll be seeing the mandatory assurance coming into place. So we'll be prepared for that as well.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Konstantinos, I wanted to see if you could kind of pull back and take a broader perspective on this, and you talk a little bit about what you see as sort of the key challenges for Greece going forward. Is Greece ready to change its production model in an in-depth way in order to be at the leading edge, at the heart of the European green transition?
It's a very good question. Now, first of all, there are some macro considerations. I mean, fiscal and monetary support measures will gradually phase out. Interest rates will not be kept at their current levels. We have foreign private investment trends show a decline. We have, despite the strong and continuous efforts, we have some the fiscal stability was adversely affected by the pandemic. But I'm certain that with the determination that the government and the banks are showing, and the social consensus that there is now in Greece,
yes,
meaning that we all agree, everybody in Greece agrees that we have to make our economy, to transform our economy, to make it more green, more competitive, extroverted, and I think we have a huge opportunity ahead of us because the Greek economy will receive approximately 87 billion of funds within the next until 2027. Most of them will be from the RRF that we discussed previously, but there are other programs. So we have a unique opportunity in the upcoming years to transform our economy in an environmentally friendly way and have sustainable and high growth rates. So I think we are exiting a very difficult period, and I think that green transition will play a key part in this in the years to come.
Great, and one quick follow-up question on that, and it was something Dimitrios mentioned a bit before on the SMEs, the small medium enterprises. Mm-hmm. Do you have any idea about how, especially non-listed small medium enterprises, to adopt ESG criteria in their strategies? I mean, we talk a lot about large companies being able to deploy this. They obviously have more resources. Do you have any thoughts about how to entice small medium enterprises to adopt ESG criteria into their strategies?
Yes, as you know, small and medium enterprises form the majority of Greek companies, as the Pissaridis Committee reports very thoroughly explained. And this presents a key issue, not only for ESG criteria, but also in terms of innovation, either in production or the digital capabilities of SMEs companies. I think that in the following years, based on the national plan that we have submitted, the RRF, there are specific measures and incentives for mergers and acquisitions and size increases so that we can form bigger companies with significant capabilities. And I also think that there are a lot of sub-programs that are targeting specifically small and medium-sized entities and will give them access to innovative processes and financing in order to accommodate these changes. Because it's a very hard world, as you know, for small and medium-sized entities, especially during this period.
Great. Alexandra or Dimitrios, any other thoughts on the small, medium enterprises to help them adopt that ESG criteria into their strategies?
I think that as banks, we will be playing a very important role in this, an educational role, if you can allow me. SMEs, small companies will realize that it will be to their benefit, and probably in the coming years it will be the only way to access cheap financing. So I think that when they realize that it's in their interest to apply ESG criteria in the way that they operate, then they will gain out of that. On the other hand, I understand that they're not in the position today to fully comply with all the requirements. I know that there's discussions within the EU to have sort of a lighter version of reporting requirements and really, make them change their mindset and the way that they operate. Because as I said before, it's all a question of culture. It's all a question of changing the way that you think and you operate. So yes, it's going to be challenging. On the other hand, I think that the support that the banks will be providing, especially from our side as a bank, working closely with our SMEs, because we're predominantly an SME bank, that's going to be a very, very important role to.
I would like to say that we spent a lot discussing about regulation and the financial institutions applying principles in terms of, the credit decisions. But I believe there is a huge pressure that SMEs also feel coming from the consumer. So consumer demand is driven by ESG, especially within younger generation. This also puts pressure on supply chain choices. So companies choose suppliers based on ESG. So I think there's pressure also coming from this side, and the SMEs will also, let's say, accelerate the adoption of ESG. And I believe banks can help them in this journey.
If I may add,
please.
Yes, there are certain challenges that need to be allocated to specific type of SMEs. For example, family-owned business may not face environmental or social-related challenges. However, they are probably going to face huge governance-related challenges. So they need to adapt the way they operate. You know, a traditional family business needs to adapt in order to provide a holistic governance way, and also be transparent about the whole ESG aspect of their operation. So that is something new. Other companies may be able to demonstrate, you know, a good environmental performance, but on the other hand, may not be able to show real good social performance, because in terms of gender diversity, for example, they employ only men. And this is something that we see in some companies. So we need to define what are the challenges for specific type of SMEs in order to be able to increase their awareness. And I totally agree that banks are going to play a really crucial role in order to be able to increase the relevant awareness of SME companies.
Great. Well, thank you to all our panelists. I really enjoyed the conversation. This is some really great topics, and I think talking about these things really helps everybody learn a little bit more. And please keep the conversation going. We'd love to keep in touch and really help deliver the news on these topics that are relevant for your day-to-day jobs. And thank you again to George for organizing the panels today, and hope you all have a great rest of your days.
Thank you, Patrick. Thank you very much, and thanks to all distinguished panelists. I think we had a very insightful discussion. The issue with the SMEs, I think, is of key importance, especially for Greece, given that they comprise, you know, more than 90% of the Greek firms. So there are many challenges, and you know, experts like the ones you have in your panel, I think they're going to play a pivotal role in the years to come. So thank you very much all once again. I think it's time to conclude the conference. We had 2 days, very interesting conference, I would say. We covered a number of topics on ESG, ranging from ESG ratings and the divergence across providers, sustainable banking, corporate strategies adapted to ESG, EU legislation, measurement of climate risks, and the practices of institutional investors. Obviously, ESG is a very wide topic. We cannot exhaust it only in 2 days, but I think this conference, thanks to you, has provided an opportunity to delve into this issue, and IFFR and EBRD are committed to continue contributing to the public debate. To close it up, may I thank once again our distinguished speakers, panelists, and journalists. May I also thank our valuable sponsors. In particular, I would like to thank our gold sponsors, Grant Thornton, HSBC, Piraeus Bank, PricewaterhouseCoopers Greece, our silver sponsor, National Bank of Greece, our supporter, Alpha Trust, our affiliate organization, which is the Athens Exchange Group, our media partners, Athens Macedonia News Agency, Afinea, Business News, Capital, GR, CSR News, CSR Week, Economia Group, Nafteboriki, Next Deal, Savvy Investors, and of course, many thanks to Financial Times for providing Patrick and Billy, two really distinguished and experts on ESG. May I also thank EBRD for the excellent collaboration we had, and in particular, Andrea Moraru, the Regional Director for Greece and Cyprus, Maya Henerkes, and Olga Aristidou, who contributed immensely to the organization and success of this conference. We had more than 1,200 delegates from all over the world attending this conference. May I also thank University of Piraeus and the Department of Banking and Financial Management, which is the oldest department in Greece. It is a boutique department which ought to receive attention. I think we're doing many good things which are not known broadly, but our students appreciate them a lot and they know what they are about. And last but not least, I would like to thank the IFFR staff, and in particular, Despina Kondopoulou, our media and marketing officer, who has spent many, many hours on organizing this conference. I know that she was chasing all of you continuously. I hope you have all enjoyed it. IFFR is committed to high quality services, and I should say that we regard our sponsors really as partners. We view them as partners. We wish to build long-term relationships with them and grow together. IFFR has completed 3 years of life, and we started being built on very solid basis. And I think that nowadays people know what we're doing and the quality of our services. So once again, many thanks to all of you, and many thanks to our audience coming from all over the world. And we're looking forward to seeing you soon again. In case you have any comments, feel free to email us and we'll definitely take them into account. Thank you very much.